What is up, everybody? We are back after, I have to say, a much more enjoyable day of football. Would y'all agree this was a much more enjoyable day of football than what we had in week one? Tons of exciting games. We had two overtime games. We had tons of stuff going on. We're going to try to recap as much as we can here right after the afternoon games are over. Actually, one of the afternoon games, we're still sitting here watching Russell Wilson miss Adam Troutman for what would have been a touchdown and would have made my DFS day very good. And so that hurts my soul. I won't lie to you about that. So right here after it, just some quick reactions. We're going to be doing this every single Sunday. It'll be in your podcast feed, obviously, on Monday mornings. However, if you want to join us live over on YouTube, we're going to do this at 7:30 Eastern every single Sunday throughout the NFL season. Go to YouTube, search Warren Sharp, subscribe to the channel. You'll get notified when we go live. And I think it's going to be a good time every single week. With that, let me introduce who's going to be doing this with us. First up, we have Curtis, our waiver wire expert. Curtis, for to talk about. I don't even know what happened there. I was busy watching Russell Wilson out of the corner of my eye, and I got flustered. Curtis, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. It was a much more fun week in the fantasy streets as well because we see some points being put on our fantasy scores. Whether the record stays the same or is different, at least we get to see ourselves get into the hundreds of points. So much better that
Yeah,
way.
no, that was the thing. That was the thing Rich and I talked about on our podcast on Thursday was just how historically bad from a scoring perspective week one was. And obviously for fantasy people, we want points and we want touchdowns, preferably to our players, but we just like points and touchdowns in general. And so yeah, week one was not as fun from that perspective as well. What I will say, it did seem like a tough day today for injuries. We got a couple really late right before we're recording. This was another like tough day for injuries, right, Tucker?
Yeah, and it was a lot of big names, and we came into today with a few guys who were inactive, like Laramie Tunsil didn't play. There were a few other offensive linemen across the league who I kind of circled as maybe their absence being an X factor in the game. And the guys that we have on their fantasy rosters, the guys that you see on highlight reels, those are the guys that we're going to be talking about tonight because there's about 5 or 6 guys with all pro caliber or all pro pedigree behind their name that I'm not sure if they're going to be on the field next week.
Let's actually start with one of those. Let's start with Saquon Barkley, which is one of the ones we saw very late on Sunday. And Saquon, he was part of the big comeback for the Giants. They came back after, I mean, one of the worst starts to a season I guess you could possibly have. Over 6 quarters of the season, they were being outscored 60-0. So that was not the best start for them, but they were able to come back and win a game they were supposed to win against the Cardinals. But late in that game, we saw Saquon Barkley hobble off, and it kind of looked like it might have been a a decently bad ankle injury, right?
Yeah, and I think the big thing that'll keep them out in week 3 is just the time crunch because they're on Thursday Night Football this week. And, we don't want to speculate. We aren't doctors, we don't have medical degrees, but he definitely got rolled up on that ankle. And the way it twisted looks a lot like what happens when you see a guy go down with a high ankle sprain. And he looked frustrated. He struggled to get off the field. He had to have help, kind of being carried to the sideline and then was really frustrated, slamming his helmet on the bench. So I think he's aware of maybe how serious this could be. But I think at least for week 3, I would be absolutely shocked if Saquon Barkley's on the field, strictly because if we don't want to, discuss what the actual injury is, I think him coming back from an ankle injury that was that painful in 4 days is going to be really, really tough.
Yeah, I mean, especially given the history he has with injuries, you would think that maybe play it a little safe for him. Although, I mean, the Giants, they did come back and win this game. They're 1-1, so we saved the season. But I mean, they're still James Conner ran wild on this defense, and if James Conner's running wild on your defense, then you could have some issues. Producer Sean actually gave us a good update here about the next player I want to talk about, Garrett Wilson. Robert Sala said that Garrett Wilson just got the wind knocked out of him. All right, that's great. I feel much better. I thought Curtis, we had Saquon and Garrett Wilson go down. It just seems like Saquon's the one that we're really worried about here. What are you thinking about this backfield from a waiver perspective? I mean, I guess it's Matt Breida, but based on kind of what we've seen from this offense already, Are we really getting terribly excited about this? They're playing the 49ers on Thursday night. Is that right?
Yeah, thanks, Rich. Don't play running backs against the 49ers. I think Kyron Williams got 2 touchdowns today, damn it. So, yeah, are you ready to fire up Matt Breida against the 49ers defense? Probably not. Could he catch a couple passes? Yeah, I don't think he's going to rush for much. I think that's a game you're going to want to look to attack the receivers. You know, who had a really nice game today was Jalen Hyatt. When they let him break free, he has speed. So I think that's going to be how they're going to attack the 49ers defense. Those outside corners are a little bit weaker. And if you can attack them with speed, they're going to have to take some big shots to stay in that game. So if I'm looking at anyone on that Giants side other than Waller and Barkley, it's going to be Hyatt moving forward. But yeah, Matt Breida against 49ers, Gary Brightwell against 49ers, hard pass.
Or Eric Gray out of Oklahoma. They drafted him? Did he make the roster? I don't pay a ton of attention to the players behind Saquon because Saquon's just going to handle 75% of the touches anyway. And so now that we have this situation, yeah, you're not getting really excited about that. Let's move on a little bit here. Let's actually talk about Amari Cooper because Tucker handles our injury report every week, and our article over at Sharp Football Analysis, which you should go and check out. It's very detailed. And actually, I was up late on Saturday, I think, and I saw a quote about Amari Cooper, and I went and threw it into the article because it was the most, I guess, negative injury quote without actually saying a player's out I've ever seen from a coach, and that was Kevin Stefanski. Then it came out on Sunday morning. It seems like Amari Cooper's not going to play on Monday night. So if you're listening to this and you hadn't heard that yet, you need to make some adjustments to your lineups. I think what really concerns me with this one, though, Tucker, is he had a groin injury in training camp, right? This is an aggravation of a pre-existing condition.
Yeah, this isn't something that just kind of popped up last week. This isn't a new thing that maybe's just hitting him. This is a nagging injury that's been going on for well over a month now. So that's concerning, especially for someone his age, someone who's kind of on the back nine of his NFL career, and that tends to bring with it more soft tissue injuries, more pulled hamstrings, pulled groins, things like that. And it may take him a little bit longer to get back as well. And it's a shame because I thought he was a real key part of that Cleveland passing offense, even though, Deshaun Watson didn't have a great day in week 1. But yeah, looking forward, if he's not on there, I mean, who are you throwing to, especially out wide? I think he was kind of the key weapon in that passing game. And if he isn't out there, if he isn't, reliable, I wonder what the ceiling is with that group.
I think that this is the opportunity. Elijah Moore is definitely rostered in, most leagues, but this could be an opportunity for Donovan Peoples-Jones, right, Curtis?
Yeah, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Cedric Tillman, he was a really good prospect. I know Ryan liked him a lot. And the tight end, David Njoku, who was kind of shut down in the first week. I think he should be all ready to go for next week. And I would probably put him in my captain's lineup in a DFS contest or two. But I'm shocked that they came out and said Amari's not playing, because as a Cowboys fan, he was always on the injured report and always managed to suit up and play a little bit. So I'm glad that came out this morning, because I was just planning to wait till tomorrow and find another solution for some of my lineups if he didn't go, assuming he was going to go.
I'm telling you, that's a fancy quote. As soon as I saw it, he said something to the effect of, well, I mean, he has tomorrow and he has the next day, so I guess we'll see what's going to happen. And I went, oh, that's not good. These are the things you learn from blurbing at Roto-World for years and years and years and years. Coaches are generally way over optimistic about injury. So if you hear them kind of be even about an injury, you go, oh no, that's a bad sign. By the way, if Pete Carroll is ever negative about an injured player, you need to worry about that player.
You need to worry about his vital signs, if that's the case.
Pete Carroll. Oh yeah, Tucker's always. I always forget, Tucker, that you and I can commiserate on the injury reports. If has Pete Carroll ever had a negative thing to say about an injury?
No, Pete Carroll's never said anything negative, and Bill Belichick's never had a player who wasn't limited in practice. Those are my two favorite things. By the end of the year, everyone on the Seahawks is healthy, even if they're in a cast, and everyone on the Patriots, even if they're playing 80 snaps a game, is limited in practice and considered questionable.
questionable list. The Patriots questionable list in week 7 and 16 is just it's really art. Like they should hang it in the loop. It's really magical from Bill Belichick. Another kind of injury situation that we need to monitor going forward actually comes from the Bengals, who find themselves 0-2 again, just like last year. But this year we have a little bit of concern with Joe Burrow, who he appeared to tweak his calf a little bit, that calf injury that limited him in the preseason. After the game, we've got a quote from him that was going to wait and see how it feels. They did say that if the Bengals had gotten another opportunity, Burrow would have gone back into the game. So that's a positive sign. But to see this preseason injury, to see how poorly he's played, and they did bounce back at least from a fantasy perspective, but it wasn't a great showing for Burrow or that offense. I mean, Jamar Chase is still trying to really get off the mark in fantasy for fantasy purposes. Like you're really starting to worry, how hurt is he? How much time could he possibly miss? Are they going to maybe try to shut him down for a little bit? How worried are you about after this aggravation, Tucker?
I think I'm more worried about it long term. And Joe Burrow improved today, right? Like they scored a touchdown. Their offense was so much better, strictly because the bar, I don't even know if it was on the ground. It was buried 6 feet under the ground coming into this week after their performance against Cleveland. But it kind of reminds me, go back to last year, and Matt Stafford dealt with an elbow injury for much of training camp. And by the end, it was, oh, he's fine. He's a veteran. Don't worry about it. And then he really struggled. And it was never kind of attributed to that, but I always wondered how much him kind of missing training camp while getting treatment on that elbow really affected him. And they ended up getting hurt further towards the end of the year and getting shut down. And I don't know if that's where things are leading with Joe Burrow, but I do think a lot of times when we hear about these training camp and preseason injuries, especially like he got injured like first day of camp, like it was really, really early. And then they just kind of shut him down for like 4 weeks. And it was always funny just how negative Zach Taylor was about the whole thing. Oh, he's 2 weeks away from being 2 weeks away. And they pretty much shut him down until he had to get on the field for the regular season. So, one, I wonder how healed it actually is. But two, I think this is kind of a learning lesson, especially, like I said, after it happened to Stafford last year with his elbow in training camp and now Joe Burrow. It's only 2 weeks. I don't want to chalk it up to a lost season for Joe Burrow because he's certainly shown that he can struggle early in the season. And then, by mid-January where the Bengals are going to be at the top of the AFC, kind of jockeying for position with the Bills and with the Chiefs. But it is worrisome to me that he's still feeling the effects of it, that he isn't, just completely moved past it yet. And if we're, at the end of September, if we're, into October and he's still dealing with it, I mean, this just might be who Joe Burrow is this year because the Bengals can't afford to have him take games off, especially now that they've started 0-2. They're in a fairly competitive division right now with the Ravens. And even though the Steelers were absolutely horrendous in week 1, they still have playoff aspirations. I think it's really worrisome for the Bengals that this is something that's now been going on for 6 weeks. And we still don't really have an answer as to if or when he'll be back to full strength this year.
Y'all are not going to believe that the Broncos just caught a Hail Mary and now have a 2-point conversion to try to tie
No
this
way.
game against Washington. Brandon Johnson, it got tipped. They tried to knock it down. The Commanders tried to knock it down at the line. It got tipped up in the air. Brandon Johnson caught it. And they have a 2-point conversion attempt here to maybe go to overtime. Wild. Absolutely wild scenes. My English soccer commentating friends would say scenes here in Denver, and we'll see how that goes. We did have a couple, concussion concerns. I don't really know how to talk about concussion concerns because it varies so much from, player to player. We had Devontae Adams leave with a concussion evaluation. I don't think we ever even got word that he that he was actually diagnosed with a concussion. It was late in the game when it happened and they took him to the locker room. We saw Anthony Richardson. We know that he left with a concussion evaluation and then he didn't come back to the game. So you're going to assume that he's in the protocol. So a lot of those kinds of things. But the other injury that I think is very interesting from a fantasy perspective is, and they didn't get the 2-point. Oh, sad times in Denver. That was that Hail Mary. Go and find it if you were watching. The other injury, though, I think from a fantasy perspective, and might have some bearing on the waiver wire, Curtis, is David Montgomery had a thigh injury. Dan Campbell, after the game, said it looked like a thigh bruise. It's a very weird way to get a thigh bruise because his leg just got completely twisted, and then he was carted to the locker room, and it looked like the ice was on his knee. So I don't know. I don't know what that was. So kind of how are you handling this situation as you're thinking about waivers this week?
Yeah, really good question. And I saw somewhere that Jameer Gibbs had hurt his ankle a bit too, that he wasn't 100%. So maybe that's why Craig Reynolds was getting some more snaps than you would have thought when after Montgomery went out. But yeah, we're going to watch and see what the Lions do because, again, that looked more serious than just a plain thigh bruise. And I guess we'll see when Wednesday comes out. But I'd assume they're flying in some running backs to help out because I don't think Gibbs is not going to be an early down runner or goal line runner. So I think they want to increase his touches, but I don't think they want to increase him to what a guy like Tony Pollard got today either. So I think they're going to want someone else to share a bit of that load with him if Montgomery's going to be out long term. But yeah, like you said, it looked more serious than just a thigh bruise, but we'll see what happens here.
Am I forgetting? Like I have this memory of Craig Reynolds actually having like a run of production. Was that a COVID haze? No, it looks like he did have. Oh, he had 230 yards in 2021, and then he had 102 last year. So I don't. But yeah, your point. It was very interesting. Maybe Gibbs is hurt, and I was dealing with an injury, but it was very interesting that after Montgomery left, it wasn't like Gibbs just stepped in and became the number one running back. It was almost like Reynolds just stepped right into the Montgomery role, which is very fascinating because if that's the case, and we're going to expect that moving forward, and they don't add a running back, obviously there are still those names out there. Kareem Hunt is still out there. Leonard Fournette is still out there. There are still those names out there. But if they're not adding anybody and we see Craig Reynolds step into that Montgomery role, that's going to be very interesting on the waiver wire to see how we deal with that because it seems like maybe, right, Tucker, maybe they just don't view Gibbs as being able to do that. That raises some interesting questions about why you spent the draft capital. But if they don't see Gibbs that way, they're not going to use him that way, and that opens up that very big role in the Lions' offense, right?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like the way they've used Gibbs and Montgomery through 2 weeks is very similar to how they used DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams last year, right? Where DeAndre Swift, I think we can all agree, is a more talented running back, a more dynamic running back than Jamal Williams is. But you look at their snap share, and Jamal Williams got the majority of the touches, and Swift was hurt for a time last year, but it was almost like Williams got first and second down, and if you needed a big play, you call on DeAndre Swift, and that's kind of what they're doing with Jamar Gibbs, which that's fine if you didn't spend the 12th overall pick on him, right? It's so weird to me that they took a guy who I think is a dynamic talent and could be a difference maker and a big play machine for this offense, which they need coming out of the backfield. And they're just choosing to ignore him the way they did last year with a guy who I thought was more talented than who became their bell cow. And maybe they don't view him in that kind of light, but I don't know. I think it's so weird because you look at what Bijan Robinson did today and the amount of touches he got in Atlanta, which I think a lot of people can breathe a sigh of relief after what we saw from him in week one. But
what I'll tell you, Tyler Algier still had 15 carries? He was still there.
Yeah.
So just putting that out, throw that out there.
But I don't know. I look at what Gibbs has done through 2 weeks, and it's fascinating. Like the usage screams he was a 4th round pick. He was a 5th round pick. He's an undrafted free agent. We picked him up off the waiver wire the last week at camp. Not, hey, we used our most prized draft capital to go pick up this guy, and he got 7 carries for 17 yards.
He did get 7 catches. I have to, throw that in there, and he got 9 targets. And so they talked all week about getting him more involved that way, getting him more involved in the game. Of course, I mean, St. Brown, Amon-Ra missed some time in this game, both because of an ankle injury and some cramping issues, but he was in the game by the end. So maybe that had a role in kind of what we saw from Gibbs. But it will be interesting to see, like, if you spent that pick on a running back and when your lead back, David Montgomery, goes down, you turn to Craig Reynolds, it does at least raise some questions for sure. One more injury, though, I missed. Actually, Logan Thomas left with a concussion after a terrible hit from Kareem Jackson. He ended up getting kicked out. That was awful. So, we'll see what happens with, Logan Thomas. But one more injury that I think will have more of a waiver influence for you, Curtis, was Odell Beckham, who hurt his ankle. They said after it's not believed to be serious, he was pretty quickly ruled out of that game. we saw Nelson Aguilar come in and have actually a pretty good game. They're big free agent signing before the other big free agent signing, right? Nelson Aguilar. So how are you handling that? What are you thinking of Nelson Aguilar?
Yeah, their fourth best receiver this year would have been their first best receiver last year, and he came in and caught 5 balls for 63 yards and a touchdown today. And I think Bateman was out there a little bit more than he was in week 1, but I kind of thought Aguilar might be involved early on in the season and have him tail off a bit once Bateman got up to speed. But he was out there and actually was more productive than Bateman today. So if Beckham misses some time, it looks like they're going to throw the ball a lot more this year. So if any of those 3 starting receivers, they can all catch balls, and they should all be rostered at some point, whether they're a flex play or just a bench stash.
I am very interested to see. I need to find them tomorrow. Unfortunately, I won't know until Monday. And again, we record these on Sunday, right after the end of the afternoon games. We go live at 7:30 Eastern over at YouTube. Go over to our YouTube and subscribe, and you'll get the notifications. It'll be interesting to see on Monday how many designed runs we saw out of Lamar, because they haven't been there, at least from what I can tell, just by watching the games. And obviously, I'd like to see if I'm missing them or things like that. A lot of what we saw today rushing was, more of the scrambling variety. And so it has been interesting to watch their offense and kind of the way it's been working. But I mean, they're 2-0. One of those wins was against the Texans. What are you going to do? But they beat the Bengals. They're 2-0. They're in a really great spot in their division. So it's really been going well for them. Another team that's been going really well for, even though they lost today, is the Los Angeles Rams. And this is the part of the show where I eat crow, where I give a mea culpa, because I thought the Rams were going to be awful, and I was terribly wrong. And I was terribly wrong for 2 very important reasons. The first reason is that Matthew Stafford is healthy. And Tucker, you mentioned that last year he just wasn't. He wasn't healthy the entire time. He ended up picking up the injury late that actually forced him out. But even before that, he wasn't healthy. He's healthy right now, and he is dealing. He is cooking. He did throw an interception late against the 49ers in that loss, but he played amazing in that game. And the other reason is Cooper Kupp is apparently on injured reserve, but maybe he's not. Maybe he's just wearing a different number, and that's Puka Nacua, who, it is always funny. We talked about this last week. It's funny when the entire fantasy community is on one of these later round wide receivers. You go, oh, this guy's the truth. This guy is real. And then he actually works out. How often does it actually work out? And it has. Puka Nacua has, I believe, the most catches and most yards for a rookie through 2 weeks in NFL history. Am I right? Was that the stat that I saw on the
correct.
broadcast? Yeah. So this has just been wild. They did lose to the 49ers. The 49ers, are one of the best teams, if not the best team in football. It is what it is. But I was wrong, 100% wrong. The Rams are going to give a lot of teams trouble this year, as long as Matthew Stafford is able to stay healthy. And it was very interesting to kind of watch that game today and see what they were able to do.
Stafford was in his bag early. He looked so good. They were designing some where he's rolling out, and he just was firing the ball to Nacua like at will. And they were designing up all sorts of crazy plays. Like, they looked so good. Like, usually McVay walks into this matchup against the 49ers and gets his clock cleaned, but they had a good chance going into the 3rd or 4th quarter today. So very surprised with that result. And I don't think we would have been shocked if we would have saw a 3 for 30 from Puka today, but he followed it up with another crazy good game. So
yeah,
how are you going to defend this offense when he and Cooper Kupp are there, Tucker? Like, what are you gonna do if both of them are there?
I think it's wild. I mean, he had 20 targets today, which last year, like, that was. I mean, I think it's funny. We talked about Cooper Kupp 2 years ago and what he did. He almost put up 1,000 yards last year in like 8 games. He had like 78.
His target share was like 33% or something like that. Some wild number in those games.
Yeah, and Puka Nacua had 20 targets on Stafford's 55 attempts. Then you add in Tutu Atwell had 9 targets, and Kyron Williams had 10 targets out of the backfield. I mean, it's kind of interesting. Like, compare that to Patrick Mahomes, who completed, I think, passes to 11 different receivers earlier this afternoon. Matt Stafford in this offense, like, he finds 2-3 guys every week and he just peppers them. Maybe that's a Sean McVay thing, but yeah, it's, as someone who's stashed Cooper Kupp in quite a few leagues and was kind of waiting for him to come back and take over this offense. I don't know. Like, could he do any better than what Puka Nacua is doing right now? Like, I don't want to sell all my Cooper Cup stock at the moment, but at the very least, the Rams are fun. Like I think we all thought they'd be bad and they'd be boring and they're old and gross and just not fun to watch. At the very least, they have put together some great offensive firepower the first couple weeks of the season. And if they're on at 425 and nothing else is going on, they could be an enjoyable team to pay attention to.
Yeah, I'm still not sold on them, making the playoffs. We saw the Seahawks bounce back and beat the Lions this week, and so we'll see how it goes. But I mean, they are way better than what I thought that they had the opportunity to be. I do want to talk a little bit about their backfield situation, however, because we saw Cam Akers be inactive with a coach's decision. I tweeted this out, but someone needs to make a Lifetime movie about the relationship between Sean McVay and Cam Akers, because it has been a wild ride over the last year and a half with those two. And so now we see Cam Akers, we saw Kyron Williams kind of not be the lead back, but certainly be the 1B at worst in week one. Now Cam Akers is benched, it seems like, coach's decision. Kyron comes out, and Tucker mentioned had a ton of catches. I believe he found the end zone. I don't know if he got the 2 touchdowns, but I know he got the one. He got the one touchdown for sure.
He had 2. He ran for 1 and he caught 1.
He ended up with 2.
Yeah.
Well, I had a fantasy team I hadn't checked yet that's going to be very excited about him ending up with 2. But so yeah, I mean, it was just a great performance from Kyron Williams against a very tough defense. And this is another one of those situations where if they're doing this against the 49ers, you're going to feel pretty good about what this offense is going to be able to do against the lesser defenses in the league. I mean, if you got Kyron Williams, if he's somehow still on your waiver wire this week, I mean, you have to go and spend a lot on him, I think, Curtis.
Yeah, if he's available, he's the number one guy there, and they're going to be in pass. Looks like they're going to pass the ball a lot. So he's going to have a weekly floor with catches, and he might find the end zone on the ground. Like he found the end zone on the ground against the 49ers. No one does that. So if he's available, just fire it all at him, because he's the top 24 running back every week with probably multiple top 6 weeks going forward when he finds the end zone.
Yeah, and I mean, we talked about this last week. If you can find someone like that early on, it's so much more valuable because of how long you have them. Of course, he is a running back. And Cam Akers rose from the dead last year. So we don't know really what's going to happen, but it's looking very good. It's looking very good for him right now. Not looking great for the Chargers. They fell to 0-2 today. Overtime loss to the Titans in a game that I don't think they really had any business losing that game. You lose last week to the Chargers. Tyreek Hill goes wild. Tua goes wild. I mean, excuse me, to the Dolphins. Like, you kind of get it a little bit. But this game, I don't really think they had any business losing. And yet they somehow lost it again. Brandon Staley made some odd decisions. I know there's one you want to talk about specifically, Curtis. This is just we're just wasting talent again with these Chargers. And Curtis, it just makes me sad almost at this point.
Yeah, I just want to root for Justin Herbert so much. And then even Brandon Staley, we loved him year one until Troy Aikman shamed him on his fourth down usage. And today he punted from he had 4th and 1 from the Titans 44, and they punted. Like, you're scared of Derrick Henry running the ball back at the end of the half on you, that you're punting in that situation. And then they had Keenan Allen had 10 targets for 111 yards. Why are you not throwing the ball more? They ran the ball at a high rate against the most pass funnel team in the league. Like, what are you guys doing?
Without Austin Eckler, too.
Yeah.
Like, that's Joshua Kelly that's been these runs.
Just throw the ball every down against those guys. We saw the Eagles do that last year, and it worked out so well for them. They have the offensive line to protect. That's all you really have to be afraid of, is that front seven, and just chuck the ball. And they found a way to lose that game late, and it's just crazy how much every year, every preseason, where this is the Chargers' year, and by week 6, it's like, okay, maybe next year. And it looks like they're off to a good start again. And you'd check the odds on first coach to be fired, and look whose name's at the top.
Yeah, I looked right before we started recording, and obviously it's off the board, on a Sunday. But last week, Staley jumped into the first spot at plus 500. Tucker, I don't know what he's going to be. I don't know what he's going to be this week, but I'm assuming you're as concerned about the Chargers and kind of where they're going with
Yeah.
Staley as the rest of us.
It's kind of funny because you just don't even look at the score. Look at the box score, and like, man, Justin Herbert had a great day. Keenan Allen had a great day. Maybe one of the more productive days across the NFL. Mike Williams had a great day himself. He had 8 catches for 83 yards.
Big
Like
bounce back.
everything
Yep.
that the Chargers want to do to win happened, right? Like offensively, they did everything that they can do, that they should do. But they ran Josh Kelly into the ground. He had 13 carries for 39 yards, and they just can't get out of their own way. And I don't know why it is. Like, I know things that happened 20 years ago by guys in the same uniforms don't affect what happened to the guys in the uniforms currently, but sometimes it does. Like, I don't know if when they packed everything up from San Diego to move to Los Angeles, they brought some of that bad luck with them and some of that just ineptness, but I don't know. There's like 3 or 4 franchises in the NFL who every year when expectations and, predictions all of a sudden get sky high, I always become skeptical, and the Chargers are one of them. Like Justin Herbert, I think is probably a top 3 talent at quarterback right now, and I don't know. I think there's like 26 other franchises that if he were the quarterback, be runaway favorites for, being in the Super Bowl. And right now they're 0-2, and I don't know what he can do more to make things better. He's just a product of his environment right now.
I mean, if Justin Herbert's the quarterback of the Jets, we're talking about we're talking about Super Bowl for sure. And so yeah, no, it's a tough situation. They were 2 for 14 on third down, which is just, I mean, you have Justin Herbert and you have a passing game that was effective in this one, and you end up that it's just it hasn't gone well. I do think that I don't know about first coach fired. Obviously, things go wild, but I do think that there's a decent chance that Kellen Moore is the head coach of this team at some point in this season, and that's going to be that's going to be interesting to see. But I'm tired of being negative. Let's move on. Let's talk about some positives. The team of Sharp Football, the Falcons. By the way, Sharp Football Analysis. We've been on the Falcons. We were on the Falcons of the preseason. If we've loved this team. If you want to get in on all of the information we have at sharpfootballanalysis.com, you can get our all access package. You'll find Rich Rebar, who even came around on the Falcons. You'll find his worksheets every week. Rich Rebar had an amazing week this week in his DFS previews that go up on Saturday. So if you're into playing DFS, that's part of our all access package. Warren Sharp's betting recommendations, that's part of our all access package. You can find all of that at sharpfootballanalysis.com. Go and check it out. But the Falcons, definitely the team of Sharp Football Analysis. They come back to win a game that Desmond Ridder didn't look great in, I would have to say, but they came back to win. He made some plays late with his legs, and now the Falcons are 2-0. The Bucs also 2-0. We'll see what happens on Monday night. I think the Saints have a decent shot at being 2-0. We could have 3 2-0 teams in the NFC South, which I don't think we would have said that at the beginning. But with the Falcons, this was a pretty good win against the Packers. This comeback was good, but I'm still kind of left, Curtis, thinking that we're going to need to see more from Ridder moving forward if this is going to be real. Not just them making the playoffs in this division. If this is going to be real and we're actually going to see them be a good team, I still think we're missing something from Ridder, right?
Yeah, I think so. I would put my money on the Saints right now to win the division if things stayed the same. As much as we do like the Falcons, but they're definitely holding back, and I think they're a little afraid of letting Ridder cost them a game, and they're just playing it safe. They can. They've got a good enough run game, but when they get up against good teams, they're going to have to go out and try to win the game and not try to lose it. And I think they're just trying not to lose right now with their run game, but at some point they're going to have to win a couple games. But their schedule is so easy that they can play like this for 14 of the 17 games. It's such a cake schedule that this is going to get them over the win total. I don't think that's in doubt, but it's kind of a mirage. They're not going to be able to do anything in the playoffs if they do make the playoffs unless they try to open up that offense a bit. But that's passing touchdown number 2 for Ridder, and I think we're rooting for about 14 from him. So he's keep going.
Yeah, we're gonna get this over. We're gonna get this over one way or another. I know you mentioned Bijan Robinson earlier, Tucker. Right? I didn't make that up in my mind. You were talking
No,
about
I
Bijan
did mention Bijan Robinson. Yeah.
Yeah, and so he was really good in this game, 19 carries for 124 yards. And we keep saying that they're not going to be able to keep doing this. Their defense does look better. I mean, they did give up 3 touchdown passes to Jordan Love, but it wasn't a great performance from Jordan Love. It's another that's 6 touchdown passes now for Jordan Love, and I haven't been wowed by either of his performances. So, we'll see what happens. Of course, they have a lot of injuries. Aaron Jones wasn't there, Christian Watson wasn't there, so on and so forth. But I mean, they get the Lions next. They get the Jaguars after that. If they're able to continue this game plan against those teams, Curtis mentioned their schedule. They might just be able to do this to everybody, and then it's going to be really interesting.
I think the next 2 games are where they can't do it, but then they got the Texans, Commanders, Bucks, Titans, Vikings, Cards, Saints. They're going to be tested in the next 2, and if they can win one of those next 2, good on them, because after that, it's open season for them to run the ball.
And I also think it's important to talk about the Bucks being 2-0, which is another team I did not expect this with. I did think the Bucks had more talent, but Baker wasn't. I didn't expect to even see this version of Baker coming out. I know I didn't actually watch a ton of this game. This is one of the games I planned to watch on Monday. I didn't think it's something that we would be talking about, but I mean, Baker played well. Mike Evans went wild. Tucker, do we have to take this team seriously?
Yeah, I mean, Chicago is dealing with a lot of injuries in their secondary, which I think certainly helped. I mean, Mike Evans, I think, had the best day of anybody today, the wide receiver position. He had 6 catches for 170 yards and a touchdown, including a 70-yard reception. But, I mean, the Baker Mayfield that we've seen so far this year, it's kind of the Baker Mayfield we saw was at 2020 when he took the Browns to the playoffs, where he's just not making mistakes. He's kind of just being a good game manager. He's playing within the offense. He's making some plays with his legs. He had 6 carries for 17 yards. He had a nice 9-yard run that picked up a key first down at one point. But the guy that we saw, I think, last year in Carolina, who was trying to do too much, who was really trying to kind of lift a franchise onto his shoulders and maybe save the job of the coaching staff at the time and keep Christian McCaffrey in the city. I don't know if he maybe learned a little bit in his couple weeks working with Sean McVay last year on how to kind of just take the play that's given to him. But I mean, right now with the weapons he has, it's probably the best weapons he's had in his career, especially at the wide receiver position. I mean, he just looks comfortable, and he's feeling himself. He's shouting at defensive backs when they try to tackle him. There's a clip that went viral last week of him telling an opposing defensive back to hit the weight room because he was too light to tackle him. I mean, I don't know if Baker Mayfield's ever going to be, the guy that should have been the number 1 overall pick and live up to that hype. But the guy that we've seen through 2 weeks is a competent NFL quarterback, and certainly someone you can win with under center. Although I think he's more of a trailer than a truck. He's not the reason you win. But so far, I mean, with the talent they have defensively and some of the weapons they have, I mean, 26 of 34 for 317 yards and no interceptions. I don't know what more you could ask for him, truly.
I saw one of his runs was he was winding through the defense. He was really going oh, I'm actually a mobile quarterback, and he was winding through. I was like, oh, what are we doing, Baker? Let's calm down a little bit. But it was interesting. People talked about his run with the Rams last year, and oh, he was better with the Rams, and that was true. He was better with the Rams than he was with the Panthers, but the bar was very, very low, and he still wasn't that good with the Rams. And so I did not expect him to come out and even play this competently. What I will say is next Monday night they get the Eagles, I believe, if I'm remembering the schedule correctly. Yes. And we could find out a lot about this 2-0 start with them. And that's what's interesting, about the Falcons. We'll probably find out something next week about what they're able to do. The Bucks will find out about their 2-0 start as well. And so it's going to be interesting to pay attention moving forward at kind of what they wanted to do. I did see my favorite, we have a Google Doc that we're updating, that we update through the day to kind of think about the topics that we want to discuss and make sure we remember. And I'm becoming a huge fan, Curtis, of your additions to it that are just a few words of genius. This one, Lamar is good at football. So you want to expand on Lamar being good at football?
Yeah, I know earlier in the week during one of our meetings, Rich had mentioned that he was worried about the Ravens offense and thought they were going to get steamrolled this week. And one of us had to remind everyone that Lamar had entered the game with a 700 winning percentage when he plays. That the Ravens are a good football team when Lamar Jackson plays football. It's very underrated. And he went in as a 3-point dog on the road today and won again. He was pretty good through the air. He had a few nice scrambles. I'm pretty sure none of those were designed runs. I think that he just kind of escaped some pressure, which he didn't look nearly as good doing in week 1. He looked a lot like the old Lamar today. And yet again, he got the job done. He's got no defensive backs on that team. So the offense went in and won them the game.
I also want to add just one more. I kind of added this note. Was this the best possible outcome for Arizona Cardinals in their first 2 games? They played tough in both games. They were up for most of the game against the Giants. They played tough against the Commanders and had a chance to win. And so they look respectable. Like, it was definitely some respectable outings for a team that we expect to be picking first in next year's draft. But they still lost both games.
I know we have some Giants fans on staff. Sorry, Todd, but yeah, the Cardinals did not want to win today. They entered with a 20. They were up 20 points at the half. They did not want to win. This was exactly how they wanted to play the second half. So anyone who's excited about the Giants, sorry, it's going to be a short game on Thursday because the Cardinals did not want to win today. So don't get too excited about that second half, Giants fans.
It's brought to you by a Cowboys fan, Curtis Hirsch. Go and find him on Twitter if you have a Giants fan. But yeah, like, Tucker, this feels ideal to me. Like, this feels like the best possible outcome.
Yeah, it's kind of exactly what I think the front office and maybe the fan base is thinking. And I think back to, living in Philadelphia when the Sixers started tanking and the process was happening. It was terrible. Like, they won, I think, 10 games one year. But I'll tell you what, like, every game you couldn't lose, right? Like, if someone had 30 points, great, but we lost by 15, who cares? We're trying to get the first overall pick. We're trying to get Joel Embiid or whoever it may be. And I kind of feel that way watching the Cardinals now. I mean, I always say expectations ruin fun when it comes to sports, right? Like, the most fun teams are the teams that we didn't expect to do anything. And then when they go on a magical run, it's unbelievable. I mean, the Cardinals have no expectations, right? Like, they could go out and Joshua Dobbs had a great first half, and I think fans there are probably super excited. And then they lose, and you know what? Who cares? We're that much closer to getting Caleb Williams, like, on a weekly basis. I don't think there's any way, if you're a Cardinals fan, you can be upset unless they decide to move the team or they, implode University of Phoenix Stadium. As long as the Arizona Cardinals still exist in Glendale, Arizona, it's a good day to be a Cardinals fan.
Yeah, like, it's odd. I've never actually rooted for a tanking. That's not true. I don't pay attention to the Houston Rockets anymore because it's been dreadful. But yeah, no, it is always fun where you go, yeah, I don't really care. We lost. All right.
And they have the Texans I think you're right too. Things are looking so good for them, right?
The Texans pick is really like the coup de grace for them. Is that I think going into the season, the 2 worst Super Bowl odds were the Cardinals and the Texans, and the Cardinals have both of those first round picks. So that is a good outcome for sure for them. They had a really good draft in kind of what they were able to do. So yeah, it's been a good start, I think, to this new. Well, if they would stop posting videos of their head coach giving speeches, then it would have been the perfect start. That would be a perfect social media team. We need to stop. Protect your head coach, please. Protect your head coach. I know we talked a little bit about Nelson Aguilar. We hit a little bit on the Giants running backs. Anybody else in the waiver wire that, we still need to get some information on some injuries, but anybody else on the waiver wire, Curtis, that you're really interested in coming out of Sunday?
Not particularly. Yeah, we're going to have to take a quick look at what happens in the next day or so with some of the late injuries, because there's not a lot of usage that was outside of the ordinary today. So I'm interested in what's coming up tonight. I'm actually want to see what happens with some of the Patriots wide receivers, but I saw Kayshon Boutte was scratched. So I'm kind of interested in the rookie slot receiver, Demario Douglas, I believe it is. See if he gets a little more run. He had some in the end of the last game. Interested to see how that plays out. But yeah, it's might be a thin week because there was some injuries, but are we going to run and spend it all on Matt Breida? No. So see what happens in this next 2 nights.
You did have, I think Josh Reynolds, maybe he had a pretty good game, right? Josh Reynolds.
Yeah, Josh Reynolds, the guy I dropped after last week for some reason. He's never going to get another touchdown again. Like, are you kidding me? And then, yeah, he's the magic touch to that offense, I guess. I would have never guessed that. But 2 touchdowns today, and that's 3 in 2 games. So he is looking pretty good. And that, yet again, that's a solid passing game over in Detroit. So
I'm also really interested in Demario Douglas tonight. And again, we record this before the Sunday night game, so y'all are going to know. But just from a waiver perspective, his usage with Juju Smith-Schuster and what's going on with Juju Smith-Schuster's knee is just really fascinating to watch because it could be interesting. So that's one of the things I'm watching moving forward. Tucker, do you have anything in particular heading into week 3 that you're interested in and will be watching this week?
Yeah, the most interesting matchup I think in week 3 is Lions Falcons, because those are 2 teams that I think have impressed a lot, but I also wonder how legit it is, right? The Lions played really well in week 1. They beat a Chiefs team who maybe we're not as high on after watching them really struggle offensively against Jacksonville in week 2. And the Falcons, we talked about at length earlier. They're a team that's won, but how sustainable is it? They remind me a little bit of the Giants last year, where they kind of just went on a roll and they kept winning, and there was no reason or factors that you could point to and say this is why they're winning. They just kept piling on, and then by the end of the year, they kind of ran out of steam, and teams kind of figured them out. I just think as long as Desmond Ritter's under center in Atlanta, they have a certain ceiling, at least right now, unless he improves dramatically. But I'm curious to see those 2 teams go head to head, because I think right now, among the teams who have a winning record in the NFC, that's wide open right now, depending on how you feel about the 49ers and the Cowboys, who I think cemented themselves as the class of the conference in week 1. Besides those 2 teams, it's wide open. And if the Lions or Falcons can kind of put things together and build on the success they've had, they could certainly put themselves in the conversation towards the top of the NFC. So that's what I'm looking forward to. I'm excited to watch that matchup next week.
This
is smiling probably because you didn't mention the Eagles. The Eagles also probably belong in that list. Although it was,
they've
tough
won the
on Thursday night
battle twice by many turnovers and have had 2 one-score games. That defense is atrocious.
Fair enough. I actually, it's interesting. You talked about the Lions and beating the Chiefs in week 1, and we don't really know what that means because of what we saw the Chiefs do against the Jaguars. I am very interested to see. I mean, you have enough institutional trust in the Chiefs and the offense and Patrick Mahomes. Travis Kelce still wasn't, he definitely was not 100% against the Jaguars. So I am very interested to see where this goes with the Chiefs. They're still 1-1. They still were able to win against the Jags.
Look what they did against Trevor Lawrence today. The defense,
their defense,
unreal. So the offense will figure itself out. I'd be more worried about the Lions because they had a game handed to them by the Chiefs, and then today they couldn't stop a offense that got 3 yards in the second half last week.
3 yards against the Rams. Again, another defense that, we don't know.
Right.
We still don't really know how much we're trusting them. Yeah, I think that's a fair point about that. I will say, that game got to go back and forth, up and down. I don't think that maybe that defense played they certainly aren't as good as we think they might have been in week 1. I don't know if they're as bad as we think they might have been last week. They lost by Gardner Johnson. They left the game at some point. So, and it's going to be interesting to see. But yeah, the Chiefs, I'm very fascinated to see kind of where that goes moving forward. What about you, Curtis?
I am looking forward to watching the Cleveland Browns defensive line tomorrow. I think, although the Bengals didn't look all that good today, I think going back and watching a bit of that game, that is going to be my second best defense in the league this year. Or you know what? Probably top 3. I'm going to put them in the same category as the Cowboys and the Jets, and not the 49ers, who I'm going to leave out of that. I think their corners are a little bit weaker and they could be exposed. But I'm really excited to see this Cleveland defense moving forward in this new system under Schwartz. And they have so much talent there. I think they're going to put it together. So I want to see them in a game against Kenny Pickett tomorrow.
It is kind of interesting that you play players in a way that they play well, and you play to their strengths and they actually play well. It's just a really, really interesting coaching idea. All right, we're going to get out of here so we can go watch the Sunday Night Football game. We really appreciate you. If you're here live on YouTube, we really appreciate you joining us. Remember, we're going to do this live every Sunday at 7:30 Eastern. So go over to YouTube, search Warren Sharp, and you can find us. And we're going to, like we said, we're going to recap every game. I'm going to be flustered at the beginning of every single episode as I'm trying to watch games and do an intro that I'm going to mess up terribly. But let me go ahead and mess this outro up as well. Come back and talk to us next week. He's there. He's Curtis. He's Tucker. I'm Ray. I got it out. We'll see y'all next week.
No.